still a couple minutes away from the start of the service, but I just wanted to check to see if you're already here. Okay. Gudyantiv.
Right. But yeah.
That's so nice. There you go. There you go. If anything starts to fly in, you swat it down, right? I'm talking flies, bees, or pelicans. You just swat it down.
I'll take the bee. Take the pelican.
No. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
I'm just glad it's not raining.
That is true. Earlier in the week.
It's gonna start raining now.
Just because you're standing there, right? That's your luck. Holy cow. I like your...
Well, that's what's behind this mysterious wall?
I can see.
You've never seen it from this side, have you?
No, I never knew what was behind here.
Yeah, just a door.
Whoa.
Hello.
I think I just saw a leaf there.
Hello. Oh, it's on.
Echo. No, it's not.
It is. I heard this. And behind there is a secret room.
Secret room? Behind there. Bunch of
It's a
flyers.
closet. It's a storage room. Come on up. Or you can sit there, whatever you want.
Hello, Howard.
Did you want to come in?
Great to see you.
We do and we don't.
Well, no.
We can't. We would love to, but we can't.
Oh, right. Now I get it.
So her older sister is reading Torah, so we wanted to hear.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Glad you're there. That's a perfect way to do that.
So many people are older here that are much more susceptible to the COVID vaccine
But
than we
they
are.
are difficult vaccine.
No, I'm saying not the COVID vaccine. They're susceptible to COVID disease. The
They're-
vaccine isn't 100%.
How they are, they
Right.
have to understand.
You can still get it. Vaccine
So I
dragon.
wanted to,
Twice.
put the card hear a melody coming from that section.
I just want you to know that when that was built, I used to sing that from that choir hall.
You did?
I did. They didn't know where it was coming from. So Mr. Parkin came and chased me and Howard Franklin out. I said, please, do not sing in the choir hall.
Huh.
That was up to pass too, Rabbi, just so you know. Something that we also recalculated.
What?
That's what closed circuit TV, closed circuit TV. Everybody was looking up there.
What's our?
Okay, I can keep going. Works out really well. It's like we planned that.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to lift, I'll call you up. If you want me to lift, I'll do it. You will. I take a chance, right? Okay.
I'll just stay because it's like 2 minutes of tragedy.
Good Joseph once again, and welcome back. We have a small crowd here in the sanctuary, hopefully a few more people who have joined us online for the Mincha service. And it's my pleasure to welcome Howard Cohen to the Bima. Howard will be our Shliach Tzibor for Mincha. I'll invite you to turn to page 361 in Machzor Lev Shalem, page 361. And because we start straight away with the Torah service, we're going to ask that you rise as the ark is open for Vayihi bin Soa. Again, page 361.
Vayihi ben Saharan, Vayomer Moshe, Duma Adonai, v'yafusu oivecha, v'yanusu mesanecha, mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'levar Adonai, mi'Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, V'yaho Yisrael, B'kedushato. Gadlu Adonai iti unaramema, Shema Yachda. Lecha Adonai hagedula ve'hagedura, ve'hatiferet ve'hanetzah ve'hahod. Kivo hashamayim v'haaretz, Kivo hashamayim v'haaretz. Lecha Adonai amamacha, amin ha'aseh lechol erosh. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, ve'yishachavu, ve'yishachavu,
Le'adam
Kadosh hu, Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, ve'yishachavu, ve'yishachavu, ve'hakashav, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Please be seated. The traditional Torah reading for the afternoon service of Yom Kippur is found on page 363 in the Machzor and comes from the 18th chapter of the book of Leviticus. It is a sort of a continuation of this morning's Torah reading from Acharei Mot, but what we are doing is, in fact, the alternate Torah reading, and we have done this for years. And you'll find that that begins on page 365, the 19th chapter of the book of Leviticus. You'll note in the margin that this particular section is referred to as the Holy of Holies when it comes to the Torah. The book of Leviticus being sometimes described as the holiness code for all of the commandments that it has regarding how one is to treat one's neighbor and how one is to interact with others. We find in this particular section the commandment to leave the corners of your fields so that those who are in need can come and take what they need, and not to reap those things which have fallen, so that, again, those who are hungry will be able to come and take without embarrassment. And, of course, the very last verse is, love your fellow or your neighbor as yourself. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, which is the directive upon which the entire Torah stands, according to the sage Hillel. We've got 3 Torah readers lined up for this afternoon, the first of whom is Nyla Blitz. So we'll invite Nyla to come to the bima now.
You can tell the families that they're coming.
Okay. And the members of Nyla's family who are permitted to be in the sanctuary will come up to the bima now for the first aliyah. Stacy? Are you going to stay, Alan? Or you want to come up? Okay.
ותגלה ותרע מלכותנו עלינו בזמן קרוב, ויחם פליטתנו ופליטת עמו בישראל, לכן חסד ורחמים ולרצון ונאמר אמן. הכל הבוד אלוהינו תנו כבוד לתורה, תעמוד משפחת פליץ לעלייה הראשונה, ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו, ואתם מדבקים באדוני אלוהיכם, חיים כולכם היום.
Baruch Adonai Hamavach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Ba'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Ba'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el kol edat bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem mishimo v'yavit tirau v'yet shavotai tishmaru ani Adonai Elohechem al tipil Aha Elohim, Elohim Hasecha, Lo Tasuru Lachem, Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We'll say Yishar Kochachen to Nyla and to Stacy. Thank you so much, Nyla. You can be seated. We'll invite Asher Kaplan now to come to the Torah for the second aliyah, page 365, now beginning in the middle of the page with verse 5. And Barry and Carolyn?
תעמוד משפחת קפלן לעלייה השני.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
V'chi tisbechu, zeveshalamim l'Adonai, l'irtzonechem tisbechu, b'yom zevachachem, yechel u'mimacharat, v'hanutar, ad yom hashlishi, v'yesh yev Yisaref ve'im hachel b'yom hashlishi pegu hu lo yisa v'halo v'kla hu ma'amea v'char Tzechem ed kitzor artzechem lo tichla pe'ud shecha liksor v'har keta kitz orcha lo tilket lo tilaked
Come on.
v'charnecha lo tilel uperet Mecha lo tilakit le'ani velagel etam ani
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Now we'll say Yishar Kochachem to Carolyn and Barry Kaplan, as well as to Asher Kaplan for his reading of the Torah. Thank you, Asher. For the third Aliyah, we are calling up Josh Kidorf to read from the Torah, and his father, Greg Kidorf, will have the third Aliyah, which is the Maftir Aliyah. Okay, yes. And his mother, Dory Sikhoff, is also coming to the Torah. Great.
Tamod Mishpachat Kidorf La'aliyah Maftir.
Page 366 in the Machzorim for the third Aliyah.
Baruch Hu Adonai Barach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol amim natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Lo tignovu v'lo techachashu v'lo tishakru ish b'amito v'lo tishavu v'shmi la shaker v'chilalta et shem Elohecha ani Adonai lo tasok et recha v'lo tigzol lo talin pulat sachir idchad boker lo tegalel cheresh v'lifnei iver lo titen michshol v'ereta me'Elohecha ani Adonai lo tasu avel b'mishpat lo tisa p'nei dal v'lo tadar p'nei gadol b'tzedek tishbot amitecha lo telech rachil b'amecha lo tamod al damrecha ani Adonai lo tisna et achicha b'lvavecha hochiach tochiach et amitecha v'lo tisa alav chet lo tikom v'lo titor et b'nei amecha v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha ani Adonai.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Say Yishar Kochachem to Dory, to Greg, and to the Torah reader, Josh Kidorf. Thank you. And if you're able to, please rise now for the lifting and dressing of the Sefer Torah. Yamod Hamagbiat Amod Hagolelet Zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei B'nei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai Bi'ad Moshe. Please be seated. On Yom Kippur, during Mincha, just before the Ne'ilah service, we need a story of inspiration, a story to lift us up from the difficult moments just before the fast is over. For this, the Jewish tradition gives us the story of Jonah the prophet. In the story, Jonah gets an order from God to go to Nineveh and to warn the people of a very large disaster. They are all about to be punished. Jonah does what anyone else would do. He runs away from God and gets on a boat. A harsh storm attacks the boat, and when the people on the boat realize that Jonah is on a mission and that he is responsible for the storm, they decide to throw him into the sea. Jonah falls into the depths of the sea and is swallowed, as we learned, by a giant fish. Nava Meyersdorf encouraged us to think about the story a little bit differently. Think about Jonah in each and every one of us. Out there, alone in the depths, you know in your heart that you have a mission, but you are thrown away in a sea that is too deep and too heavy. Jonah is each and every one of us. He is any of us who has a mission, whether it is to save the environment, to fight for equality between genders or between identities, or against racism, or for any other repair of our fractured world. Like Jonah, we encounter bumps along the way, and sometimes it feels like we are swallowed by a fish and descending into the depths. I hope that we can learn from Jonah and that we will listen to our inner voices and find the courage, as Jonah eventually did, to speak up and share the messages we need to deliver. We'll turn now in our Machzorim to page 367, and Greg Kidorf will be chanting selections from the Haftarah. It won't be all the verses consecutively, but he will begin, let me just double check, with chapter 1, verse 1, and then after chapter 9, skip to chapter 2. We'll hear selections from chapter 3 and chapter 4 as well.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nviim tovim, v'rtza v'divreihem hane'marim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habucher b'torah, uv'Moshe avdo, uv'Yisrael amo, uv'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Vahi devar Adonai El Yonah ben Amitai lemor, kum lech el Ninveh, ha'ir ha'gedola ukra aleha, ki alta ra'atam lefanai, v'yakam Yonah livroach tarshisha milifnei Adonai, vayered Yafo v'yimtza aniyah ba Tarshish, vayetain Sichara, vayered ba lavo imahem Tarshisha melifnei Adonai. Adonai hetil ruach gedola el hayam, vahisar gadol bayam, v'haniya chishva v'hishaver, v'yeru hamalachim, v'yizaku ish el Elohav, v'yatilu et hakelim, asher baniya el hayam, lahakel melahem, v'yonah yarad el yikarte haspina, v'yishkav v'yiradam, v'yikrav Elav Rav HaChovel, Vayomer Lo Malacha Nirdam, Kum Kira El Elohecha, Ulai Yitashet HaElohim, Lanu Velo Noved, Vayomru Ish El Re'ehu, Lehu V'napila Goralot, V'neda Bishelmi Hara'ah Hazot Lanu, V'yapilu Goralot, V'yipol Hagoral Al Yonah, V'yomru Elav Hagidana Lanu, Asher Lemi Hara'ah Hazot Lanu, Mamlachatacha Ume'ayin Tarvo Ma Artsecha Ve'emize Am Ata, Vayomer Alehem ivri anochi v'et Adonai Elohei hashamayim ani yareh asher asa et hayam v'et hayabasha.
Chapter 2, verse 1.
Vayman Adonai da gadol livloa et Yonah Vayhi Yonah bim'ei hadag shlosha yamim ushlosha lelot Vayitpalel Yonah el Adonai Elohav mim'ei hadaga Vayomer karati mitzarali el Adonai v'ya'aneni mi beten sheol shivati shamata koli v'tashlicheni mitzula bilvad yamim v'nahar yisoveveni kol mishparecha v'galecha alai avaru Va'ani amarti nigrashti mineged einecha ach osif lahabit el hecho kadshecha.
Verse 11.
Vayomer Adonai ledag v'yakeh et Yonah el hayabasha v'hi davar Adonai el Yonah shenit lemor kum lech el ninve ha'ir hagdola ukra eleha et hakiria asher anochi dover elecha v'yakam Yonah v'yelech el ninve kidvar Adonai v'ninve hayta ir gdola le'Elohim mahalach shloshet yamim Vayachel Yonah lavo ba'ir mahalach yom echad vayikra vayomar od arba'im yom v'ninve nehepachet.
Page 370, verse 9.
Mi yodea yashu v'nicham ha'elohim v'shav mechoron apo v'lo noved Vayar Elohim et ma'asehem ki shavu midarka hara'a v'yanachem ha'elohim al hara'a asher diber lasod lahem v'lo asa vayera el Yonah ra'a gedola vayichar lo v'yitpalel el Adonai vayomar Ana Adonai chalozeh devari ad hayoti al admati al kain kidamti livroach tar shisha ki yadati ki ata el chanun v'rachum erech apayim v'rav chesed v'nicham al hara'ah Ve'ata Adonai kachna et nafshi mimeni ki tov moti mechayai. Vayomer Adonai ha'hetev hara lach.
Page 371, the selection from Mincha in the middle of the page.
Mi el kamocha nose avon v'over al pesha Lisherit nachalato lo hechezik la'arapo ki chifetz chesed hu yashuv yarachemenu yichbosh avonotenu v'tashlich bimsulot yam kol chatotam titen emet leYaakov chesed la'Avraham Asher nishpat al avotenu mimei kedem. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol amim tzadik b'chol hadarot hayal ne'eman homer v'yoseh hamdaber umkayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek Neman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'manim devarecha, v'devar echad midvarecha, achul yeshuv rekam, ki el melch ne'man v'rechaman ata, baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Hu v'roshmo.
hayal ne'man v'chol devarav.
Amen.
Rachem al tziki beit chayenu, v'la'olavat nefesh toshia b'mira v'yameinu, baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Hu v'roshmo.
v'samech tzion b'vaneha.
Amen.
Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu b'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha u'malchut beit David mashichecha b'mhira yavo v'yagel libenu al kiso lo yeshev zar v'lo yinchelu od acharim et kvodo ki v'shem kadshecha nishpata lo shelo yichben eiro le'olam va'ed baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Hu v'roshmo.
Magen David.
Amen. Asher Koach. Thank you so much, Greg. Nicely done. We'll turn now to page 372, and if you're able to, please rise as the Sefer Torah is about to be returned to the Ark.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, Ki niskav Shemo levado.
Odo aleretz v'shamayim v'yarem keren li'amo tila lechol chasidav livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
LeDavid Mizmor. Mihuze melech hakavod, Adonai tzvaot, hu melech hakavod selah. Unechol yomar. Ki lekach tov, natati lachem, Torati, al tazovu, etz chayim hi, lamachazim ma,
We'll remain standing for the Chatzi Kaddish, the lower half of page 373, following which we'll recite the Amidah individually, beginning on page 213.
Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
B'yom Divrach, Hirutei, B'yom Lichmachutei, B'chayechon, U'v'yomechon, U'v'chayei dechol Be'Yisrael, Ba'gala u'v'zman karib, V'yimru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach, Le'olam Olmei Olmaya, Yitbarach. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yipar, V'yitraman, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yithalev, V'yithalal, Shemei Dekudesha B'richu. Leila, Leila,
shirata tu shpechata v'nechemata damiran biyama v'yimru.
Amen. Take a few minutes now for individual prayer, page 213 through page 221. And if you prefer, you can use this time for personal prayer, reflection, or meditation. As you complete the Amidah, please be seated. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May God who establishes peace in the heavens grant peace to us, to Israel, and to all humanity. And let us all say amen. We'll turn now to page 374 in our Machzorim for the repetition of the Mincha Midah. If you're able to, please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Hu v'shmo.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imatenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Oel Hagadol, Gibor v'Hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot v'Imot Chod, Umevi Goel, V'nei B'neihem L'man Shemo V'Yahava, Misod Chachamim Vonim, Umilemed Dat Mevinim, Eftecha fi B'Tfilah Uv'Tachanunim, Lechalot Ulchanen, Pnei Melech Malei Rachamim, Mochel V'Soleach La'avonim.
The ark is closed, but we remain standing as we turn to page 375.
Zachreinu L'chaim, Melech Hafetz B'chaim, Melech Hafetz B'chaim, V'chadveinu v'Sefer HaChaim, L'ma'ancha Elohim Chaim. Melech Ozer Ufoked Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch Hu v'Shmo.
Magen Avraham, Ufoked Sarah.
Amen.
Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayim Eitim, Atah Rav Lehoshia. Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayim Eitim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayim Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gevura, Umidom Elah, Melech Meimid Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, Michamocha Harachamim, Zocher Yitzurah, L'chaim B'rachamim, V'ne'eman atah l'hachayim eitim, Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch Hu v'Shmo.
Mechayei hametim.
Amen. Page 376.
Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, L'dor v'ador, Hallelujah. V'atah kadosh Yoshev, Tehilot Yisrael, Tehilot Yisrael, Elna. Kakatuv ayan v'yecha, v'karazel zeviyamar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavot, Melo kol haaretz kivodo, kivodo malei olam, kivodo malei olam, mishor tov, shoalim kivodo, leumatam, leumatam, Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Kivod Adonai, Mim Komo, Mim Komo,
Mim como,
Huifen, Huifen, Barachamim, Vayachon, Am Yachadim Shemo, Erev Ker Bechol Yom Tamid, Pamayim Biahava, Shema Omrim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Hu Yashmienu, Yashmienu Berachamav, Sheni, 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 Sheni Li'enei Kol Chai, Li'yot Lochem L'Elohim,
Ani Adonai Elohechem,
Adir, Adirenu Adonai, Adonenu, Ma'adir Shemcha L'chol haaretz, V'hayah Adonai L'melech HaKol haaretz, V'yam ha'hui Adonai Echad, U'shemo Echad. U'divrei kodshecha katuv le'mor,
Yimloch Adonai Le'olam, Elohai Yitzion, Le'dor Vador, Hallelujah.
Le'dor v'dor nagigot lecho, L'neitzach netzachim kedushecha nakdish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu, Mipinu lo yamush li'olam vo'ed, Ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata.
Please be seated as we turn now to page 377.
Chamol amasecha v'timach b'masecha v'yomru l'cha chasecha b'tzadekecha mustecha tugedash Adon al kol masecha Uv'chein tein paktecha Adonai Eloheinu al kol masecha v'ematcha al kol mashavrata v'yirucha kol hamasim v'yishtachavu lefunecha kol haborim v'yasu chulam ha'gedat echad la'asaf b'tzoncha b'leivav shalem K'moshe dano Adonai Eloheinu shal shulton lefunecha Aspi yadecha u'gevura b'yaminecha V'shimcha nora al kol mashavrata Uv'chein tein kavod Adonai li'amecha tehila l'recha v'tekva l'dorshecha u'pechon pelam yachal imilach Simcha li'artzecha v'sason li'recha u'smichat keren l'David avdecha v'arichat ner l'veini shai meshichecha b'mheira b'yameinu u'v'chein tzadikim yeru v'yismachu v'yisharim yalozu v'chasidim b'rein agilu v'yalatar tikpas pia v'chol harisha kulam ki yashan tichleh ki ta'avir memshelet zadon min ha'aretz v'timloch ata Adonai levadecha al kol masecha b'har Tzion mishkan kavadecha Yerushalayim ir kodshecha kakatuv b'divrei kodshecha Yimloch Adonai li'olam Elohayich Tzion l'dor v'dor. Hallelujah.
Page 378.
Kadosh ata v'narash mecha v'ein Elohim baladecha ka'katuv. Like Adonai tzavot b'mishpat v'hohel hakadosh mekadosh b'tzedakah. Baruch atah Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh. Ata b'chartanu mikol ha'amim ahavta atanu v'ratzita banu ramatanu mikol hashanot v'kirshtanu b'mitzvotecha v'kerotanu makin al v'adodotecha v'shimcha hagadol v'hakadosh oleinu karata v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'yahavad yom hakaburim hazeh lemchila v'lislicha v'lkapara l'mincha bo'et kol avanotenu Mikra Kodesh, Zecher L'tziat Mitzrayim. Eloheinu v'Elahevotenu v'imatenu, Ya'alev Yavo Igia, V'erev Yirtzev Yashama, Vipaked Visacher Zachronenu, Victornenu, Vizachron of Atenu, Vimatenu, Vizachron Mishiach ben David Abdecha, Vizachron Yerushalayim Bir Kodshecha, Vizachron Kom Chaves Israel Levonecha, Lefleita Letova Lacheno Chesed Urachamim, Lechayim Shalom, Bayom HaKippurim Hazeh. Zochrenu Adonai Eloheinu bo letova.
Amen.
Uvakdenu bo levracha.
Amen.
V'hoshienu bo l'chaim.
Amen.
Uvevayishu v'rachamim chus v'chanenu v'rachem aleinu v'hoshienu ki elecha einenu ki al melech hanun v'rechu mata.
On page 379, we'll continue with responsive reading by stanza. God, sovereign, who sits on a throne of mercy, acting with unbounded grace, forgiving the sins of your people one by one as each comes before you, generously forgiving sinners and pardoning transgressors, acting charitably with every living thing, do not repay them for their misdeeds. God, you taught us how to recite the 13 attributes of your name. Remember the promise implied in these 13 attributes, which you first revealed to Moses, the humble one, as it is written, God descended in a cloud and stood beside him, and he called
the name Adonai.
And Adonai passed before him and called, Adonai, Adonai, God merciful and compassionate, patient, abounding in love and faithfulness, assuring love for thousands of generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and granting pardon. Forgive our transgressions and our sins, claim us for your own. Forgive us, our Creator, for we have sinned. Pardon us, our sovereign,
for we have transgressed.
For you, Adonai, are kind and forgiving. You act generously to all who call on you. For our sake, remember the covenant you made with our ancestors. As you said in the Torah, I will remember my covenant with their ancestors, whom I took out of the land of Egypt in the sight of all nations, to be their God. I am Adonai.
Sweep aside our transgressions like a mist, disperse them like a cloud, as you promised in the words of Isaiah. I sweep aside your sins like a mist, and disperse your transgressions like a cloud. Turn back to me, for I will redeem you.
Purify us as your prophet Ezekiel promised in your name. I will sprinkle purifying water upon you, and you shall be cleansed. I will cleanse you of all your impurities and your idolatries.
Purify us on this day, as is written in your Torah. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify from you and all your transgressions. In the presence of Adonai you shall be pure.
Bring us to your holy mountain and make us joyful in your house of prayer. As Isaiah prophesied, I shall bring you to my holy mountain and make you joyous in my house of prayer. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. Please rise as the ark is open once again for the chanting of Shema Kolenu. Howard will chant each line in the Hebrew. We'll respond by repeating that line. No? Shema Kolenu.
Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem Aleinu V'kabel barachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu
Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem aleinu v'kabel barachamim uratzon et tefilateinu.
Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh yameinu ki kedem
Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh yameinu kekedem.
Al tashlichenu milfanecha V'ruach kodshecha Al tikach mimenu
Al tashlichenu milfanecha v'ruach kodshecha al tikach mimenu.
Al tashlichenu leit zikna Kichlot kochenu al ta'asvenu
Al tashlichenu leit zikna kichlo kochenu al tazvenu. Let's read together in the middle of page 380 in the English. Do not abandon us. Do not abandon us, Adonai our God. Do not distance yourself from us. Give us the signal of hope, so that our enemies will understand and hesitate. knowing that you have been our help and comfort. Hear our words, Adonai, and consider our innermost thoughts. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and redeemer. It is for you we wait. Surely you will respond, Adonai, our God. Ark is closed. Please be seated.
Ulaman Shimcha Hagadol Tishmachal Tislach Lavanenu Kakatu Pidivre Kodshecha Laman Shimcha Adonai Visalachti Lavoni Kirafu.
Page 381.
Eloheinu Velohevotenu Vimotenu Silach Lanu Michalanu Kaper Lanu Ki Anu Amecha V'yata Eloheinu Anu Vanecha V'yata Abinu Anu Avadecha V'yata Adonenu Anu Kehalecha V'yata Chelkeinu Anu Nechalatecha V'yata Goraleinu Anu Tzonecha V'yata Roeinu Anu Chamecha V'yata Nodreinu Anu Fulatecha V'yata Yotzreinu Anu Rayatecha V'yata Dodeinu Anu Segulatecha V'yata Kiroveinu Anu Amecha V'yata Malkeinu Anu Mamirecha V'yata Mamireinu Anu Azefani V'yata Rachum V'chanun Anu Ksheorech V'yata Erech Apayim Anu Malei Avam V'yata Malei Rachamim Anu Yemenu Ketzel Over V'yata Hushnotecha Lo Itamu Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu V'imotenu Tavo Lefanecha Tefilatenu Ve'al Tidalam Mitechinatenu She'ein Anachnu Asefanim K'shei Orev Lomar Lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avotenu V'imotenu Tzadikim Anachnu V'lo Hatanu Aval Anachnu V'avotenu V'imotenu Hatanu Aval Anachnu V'avotenu V'imotenu Hatanu.
Please rise and turn to page 382. We'll join Howard in the chanting of Hashamnu.
Hashamnu, Paganu, Gazalnu, Divarnu Dofi, Hevinu, Vihirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tifanu Sheker, Yatsnu Kizavnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niyatsnu, Saranu, Avinu, Pishanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Oref,
Shichatnu,
Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu. Sarnu mimisatak mimishpatak hadavim velo shava lanu, Yata tzadika kol haba aleinu, Kiyemet asita vanachnu hirshanu.
Please be seated. Howard continues now with the Bet section, lower half of page 382.
Eloheinu v'Elohevatenu v'Imotenu, Salach Makavatenu b'Yom HaKippurim, Hasem Mechev Ha'aver P'Sheinu, V'Chatetenem Minagedinecha, V'Chol Et Yitzreinu V'Hishtach Bedloch, V'Hachnat Arpenu L'Shot Elecha, V'Chadesh K'Liotenu L'Shmor P'Gidecha, Omalet Levavenu Le'ava L'Yira Et Shemecha, Kakatu B'Toratecha, Omarne Elohecha Et Levavcha, V'Et Levav Zorecha, Yavoid Adonai Elohecha, B'chol Levavcha, V'chol Nafshecha, L'Ma'an Chayecha.
We've now arrived at the longer form of the confessional. It's found on page 384. If you're able to, please rise for the recitation of Al Chet.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefnei B'Ones Uvratzon,
V'Al Chet Shratanu Lefanecha B'Mutzaleh.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Vlidat,
V'Al Chet Shratanu Lefanecha B'Vitui Svatayim.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Gilui Arayot,
V'Al Chet Shratanu Lefanecha L'Galui Uvasater.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Dat Uvmirma,
V'Al Chet Shratanu Lefanecha B'Dibor Peh.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Honat Reah,
V'Al Chet Shachatanu Lefanecha B'Ahor Halev.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Vidat Zinut,
V'Al Chet Shachatanu Lefanecha B'Vidui Peh.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Zilzul Harim Abarim,
V'Al Chet Shachatanu Lefanecha Zadonu Ishkaga.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Chazek Yad,
V'Al Chet Shachatanu Lefanecha B'Chilul Hashem.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Tumat Shifatayim,
V'Al Chet Shachatanu Lefanecha B'Tishu Peh.
Al Chet Shachatane Lefanecha B'Yetzer Hara,
V'Al Chet Shachatanu Lefanecha B'Yodim V'Lo Yodim.
V'Yal Kulam Elo HaSalichot, Selach Lanu Mechalanu Kaper Lanu.
Continue responsibly in the English lower section of page 384. We have sinned against you through denial and deceit.
And we have sinned against you by taking bribes.
We have sinned against you by clever cynicism.
We have sinned against you by
speaking badly of others.
We have sinned against you by the way we do business.
And we have sinned against you in our eating and drinking.
We have sinned against you by greed and oppressive interest.
And we have sinned against you through arrogance.
We have sinned against you in everyday conversation.
And we have sinned against you from
Conspiratorial glances. We have sinned against you through condescension.
We have sinned against you through ego.
For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
V'Al Kulam Elo HaSalichot, Selach Lanu Mechalanu Kaper Lanu.
We have sinned against you by throwing off all restraint.
We have sinned
Against you by rashly judging others.
We have sinned against you by plotting against others.
And we have sinned against you through selfishness.
We have sinned against you through superficiality.
We have sinned
against you through stubbornness.
We have sinned against you by rushing to do evil.
We have sinned against you
through gossip.
We have sinned against you through empty promises.
And we have sinned against you through baseless hatred.
We have sinned against you by betraying a trust.
And we have sinned against you by
succumbing to confusion.
For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
V'Al Kulam Elo HaSalichot, Selach Lanu Silach lanu mechalanu, Silach lanu mechalanu, kaper lanu.
Please be seated. Howard continues the middle of page 386, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei v'yamotenu, mechal avanotenu v'yom ha'kippurim, hazeh mechav ha'aver p'shainu, v'chatotenu mineged einecha ku'amor, anochi anochi ha'mecheh p'shecha, lemani v'chatotecha lo eskor, v'ne'amar mechiticha p'shecha, v'chanat chatotecha, shuva elai ki gialticha. V'ne'amar ki b'yom hazeh yikaper aleichem v'taher etchem, v'chatotechem, Lifnei Adonai titaru. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'imotenu, Gadshenu b'mitzvotecha, Tenkokenu b'torottecha, Sabenu b'tufecha, V'samchenu b'shuvotecha, V'tahir libeinu le'avdecha mi'emet, Ki atah sulchan Yisrael, Machalon l'shivtei Yeshurim b'chol dor v'odor, Mibaladecha ein lonu melech mochel v'soleach, Ela atah, Baruch atah Adonai. Melech Machel v'Salech Lavanatenu, Liamo Beit Israel, Ma'avir Hashmanatia, V'chol Shana V'Shana, Melech al Kol Haaretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, Melech al Kol Haaretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, Melech al Kol Haaretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, V'yom HaKippurim.
Amen. Page 387.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, b'yom kol Yisrael tfilotam, v'hoshevet ha'avodah l'dvir beitecha, v'tfilotam v'avat tegbal v'ratzon, v'tehilu ratzon tamir v'dat Yisrael amecha, v'zechazenu eineinu, b'shuv kol etzion brachamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Amachazir Shekinato L'Tzion.
Amen. Modim anachnu
Atov kilo chalu rachamecha v'hamrachim lo tamu chasadecha milam kivinu lach v'yal kulam yitbarak v'tramam shimcha malkeinu tamed li'olam v'ed.
Page 388.
Avinu malkeinu zechar rachamecha uchavos kiyasecha v'chalei dever v'cherev v'ra l'shaviv mashchit v'avon Ushmad Magefa Fegara Vechal Mechala Vechal Ketala Vechal Ketata Vechal Mene Franiot Vechal Gezerah Vesinat China Me'aleinu Me'alkol B'nei V'ritecha Uchetov L'chaim L'chaim Tovim Kol B'nei V'ritecha V'chol ha'chaim yiducha selah v'yalu ha'shemcha v'yemet O'el yeshuvatenu v'yisratenu selah Baruch atah Adonai Atov shemcha l'chana elehodo.
Amen.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'yimotenu Baruchenu b'baracham shulesed b'Torah Hakadu v'yedei Moshe avdecha Omoram epi Aaron uvanav kohanim Am kedushecha kamor Yivorecha Adonai v'yishmorecha
Yiratzon.
Yo'er Adonai p'nei v'lecha v'chunecha
Ein yiratzon.
Yisa Adonai p'nei v'lecha v'yasein lecha shalom
Ein Yiratzon.
Sim shalom bilam tova bracha chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu v'yachal Yisrael amecha v'archeinu avinu kol ha'kiachad b'hor ponecha v'b'hor ponecha natato lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torah chayim lehavat chesed v'tzedakah v'racha v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom v'tov b'yeinecha l'berekas amcha Yisrael v'chal eis uv'chal shah b'shlomecha B'sefer chayim b'shalom, umfarnasa tova, b'sefer chayim, b'racha b'shalom, umfarnasa tova, nizacher v'nikater lefanecha, anachnu v'kol amcha b'Yisrael, l'chaim tovim u'shalom. Baruch atah Adonai, Osei HaShalom.
Amen.
Turn to page 390 for Kaddish Shalem.
Yikal v'yishkar shemei Rabba.
Amen.
Yamadi v'ragate v'yamlik machate b'chayichan v'yamekhan v'chayed kol b'Yisrael b'agalav v'zman kori v'yimru.
Amen.
Yeshmei Rabba mevorach v'yolam me'omaya yiparach yiparach v'yishtabach v'yiparach v'yimai v'yaseh v'yadav v'yalav shmei d'kusha b'richu leila leila mekal b'karta v'shirata tushbachata v'nakamata d'amiram v'yalama v'yimru.
Amen.
Tikabel Solzhan V'Archan, Dechol Yisrael Kadam V'Archan, Divishmaya V'Yimru.
Amen.
Yehi Shalom Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yimru.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom B'Rama V'Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yimru.
Amen.
Let's all say Yishar Koach to Howard Cohen. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Beautifully done. All right, we have just a few minutes now before the start of the Martyrology service. It looks like our guest speaker, Doug Survey, has arrived, which is a good sign. And we'll begin in just a few moments. Martyrology service will begin on page 337 in our Machzorim. We are back and preparing now for the Martyrology service. I'll ask those in the sanctuary who can to please take your seats. And if you're watching at home, please note that the Eila Ezkara service begins on page 337 in the Machzorim, page 337. Eila Ezkara, these I recall. The Martyrology service helps us to remember revered sages who met their deaths at the hands of the Romans because they refused to give up the practice and the teaching of Judaism. And throughout the ages, sadly, Jews have been persecuted for the very same reason, because they would not give up being Jewish and holding to all of the mitzvot, all the commandments, and the principles and the values of our people. We recall all of these through the Martyrology service, and those who in the last century died at the hands of the Nazis as well. And so the Martyrology service gives us an opportunity each year to invite to the synagogue someone to speak, oftentimes from firsthand accounts about the Holocaust, or, as we will have here today, someone who has devoted his life to teaching about the Holocaust. We begin on page 337. Cantor Sarah Lee chants Eila Ezkara.
Eila Ezkara v'nafshi alai, v'nafshi alai eshbecha al kotenu hamarot, einai zogot hamarot, einai zogot dima.
Please read with me the martyrdom of Rabban Shimon. In the time of the Roman Empire, God suffered 10 rabbis to be martyred. 2 of the most distinguished were taken out first, Rabbi Ishmael, the high priest, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, head of the Sanhedrin. Rabban Shimon pleaded to be executed first in order not to gaze upon the death of the one who had served God in the temple. The tyrant commanded that lots be cast, and it fell to Rabban Shimon to be martyred first and have his blood flow like a slaughtered bull. Rabbi Ishmael picked up his severed head and cried bitterly, like the shofar, how the tongue that rushed to teach such beautiful words now licks the earth because of our sins. These I recall.
Eila Ezkara v'nafshi alai, v'nafshi alai eshbecha al kotenu hamarot, einai zogot hamarot, einai zogot dima.
We continue with the reading of the martyrdom of Rabbi Akiva. The Romans decreed that the people Israel no longer be allowed to study Torah. Rabbi Akiva publicly convened assemblies and continued to teach Torah. He was captured and imprisoned. The hour of execution was the time for the recitation of the morning Shema. So as they scraped his skin with iron combs, he recited the Shema, accepting the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven. His pupils cried out, "Even now?" He said to them, "All my life I was troubled that I could not fulfill the verse to love God with all your soul. That is, even should God take your life. I asked myself, when will the time come that I can fulfill the verse? Now that I have that possibility, shouldn't I fulfill it?" He prolonged the word one, so that his soul left him as he uttered the word one.
Eila Ezkara v'nafshi alai, v'nafshi alai eshbecha al kotenu hamarot, einai zogot hamarot, einai zogot dima.
We turn the page and we'll read the martyrdom of Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion, middle of the page. They also found Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion sitting and teaching Torah in public with the Sefer Torah in his lap. They wrapped the Sefer Torah around him, piled branches round about, lit them, and placed wet wool over his heart so that he would not die quickly. His disciples asked, "Master, what do you see?" He replied, "The parchment is burning, but the letters are flying free." These I recall.
Eila אזכרה ונפשי עליי, ונפשי עליי יש בך. עקרותינו המרות, עיניי זוגות המרות, עיניי זוגות דמעה.
Yehuda Bauer, Israel's most significant Holocaust scholar and educator, has listed 3 commandments as stemming from the Holocaust. In a speech on Holocaust Remembrance Day to the German Bundestag, Bauer said, "You, your children, and your children's children shall never become a perpetrator. You, your children, and your children's children shall never, ever allow yourselves to become victims. You, your children, and your children's children shall never, ever, never be passive onlookers to mass murder, genocide, or, may it never be repeated, a Holocaust-like tragedy." Bauer has told us what we must not be. Holocaust survivors and Holocaust rescuers have taught us what we must be, and that is upstanders, confronting evil, enlarging the domain of human responsibility one for another, standing with the oppressed and not the oppressor. The Holocaust has become the negative absolute and thus a touchstone for human ethics. And survivors themselves have become defined not by that anguish they suffered, but by the resilience they have manifested in its aftermath. Not as victims, but as witnesses, speaking to our generation and to generations beyond. Today we have not a survivor, but a man who has spent a good portion of his life teaching about the Holocaust to speak to us. Doug Survey is currently serving as the executive director of the New Jersey Holocaust Education Commission. He'll introduce himself with more in just a moment, but I wanted to mention that Gail Rosenthal, the executive director of the Sarah and Sam Schaffer Holocaust Resource Center at Stockton College, and our contact for so many of our speakers because, as it happens, she is a cousin of Judy Kaplan, our member. Gail has said that Doug is a true leader. He is respected by survivors, their children, students, and educators. He has truly changed many students' lives. He is kind and he is caring, and he wants to remember the past to make a better future. It is my privilege now to welcome Doug Survey to the Bima for his presentation.
Thank you, Rabbi, for that nice introduction. For everybody that is here, this is a beautiful synagogue. I was raised Roman Catholic. How I got about studying the Holocaust really came by accident. I was very fortunate to go to Pennsylvania Military College, where I played football for 4 years. And at my senior year, second semester, I'm student teaching, and I had one methods class, and I think most of you are aware, should be aware, I guess, is that they have a class where they basically teach you how to keep your students in control so they're not climbing the walls and throwing papers at each other and that type of thing. And so the professor, there was all the disciplines were there. There was physics teachers, history teachers, science, and so on. And so he showed a film, Night and Fog, which the French had made in 1956-57, about the liberation of the camps with English subtitles. So after the film was over, I said, "Professor," he goes, "any questions?" I go, "What is this film about?" He said, "Well, the film is about the Holocaust." I said, "Okay, what's the Holocaust?" So he says to me, or says to the class in general, "Don't you know about this? What is your major?" I says, "Well, I'm a social studies major, I'm a history major. I'm mostly studying European history. I hopefully will get a student teaching job after I graduate from college." The Vietnam War had just ended. I had been commissioned as second lieutenant in the military, had gone down to Fort Knox, or planned to go to Fort Knox, for training down there for 3 months, and then I was fortunate to get a job at a local high school where I had graduated. So he said, "I can't believe you're a history major and you've never heard of the Holocaust." I said, "Well, why don't you ask the rest of the class and see if they know what this is about?" So this gentleman says to me, "Okay, wise ass." I'm thinking, okay, this is a methods class. You're not supposed to make disparaging remarks to your students. So I'm thinking, he goes, "Fine." So he did ask the rest of the class, and one student raised his hand. So I lean over and I go, "Josh," I go, "how do you know this?" He goes, "Well, I'm Jewish." I go, "Congratulations, I'm Catholic. What does that have to do with this film?" And he says, once again playing the game without your helmet on. We need to talk about this. And I go, fine. Let's go out to dinner for beer and pizza. You tell me about what the Holocaust is, because I don't know anything about this subject. Well, here I am 49 years later, teaching a subject which to me is the most important subject that I taught for 41 years in high school, and I'm very fortunate to be able to teach at Stockton University, which actually has, and even my students didn't know this last Tuesday when I told them, that we have more Holocaust genocide classes than any university in the world. And they were sort of stunned at that. We do about 1,000 students every semester, so do the math on that and how many years that Stockton has been open. I was very fortunate. The rabbi had mentioned Yehuda Bauer. He was one of my graduate professors, an extremely intelligent gentleman, without a question. I think he's 98, 99 years old right now, along with Dr. Birnbaum, who also was one of my professors, who I use a lot of his information as I do Dr. Bauer's. So I end up in my high school where I graduated from, and I now have a 3-day unit about a subject I know very little about. Unbeknownst to me, I had gone to school with my classmates, about 12 to 14 of them, their parents were Holocaust survivors. I did not know that. One of them was a social worker in our school, and I said, Gloria, you need to tell me about what your mom went through. And she said, well, you didn't know. I said, well, you never said anything. It was like World War II veterans. When they came back from the war, they wanted to forget what happened. They just wanted to move on with their lives, raise a family, have grandkids, and move on after. So as a result of that, my 3-day unit went to 5 days, went to 2 weeks, went to 3 weeks, and I still can't finish. And my students want to know more than I have time to offer them. And I said, look, I've got to stop now. I've got to get to the Cold War in Vietnam, but we will try to get back to this if I have time at the end of the year. Most of the students that I taught are non-Jewish students. I have one Jewish student in my class, which is usually the average each semester. I've been at Stockton for 7 years right now, going on my 8th year. We try to take students down to the Holocaust Museum, but as you know, you're only allowed to bring 8 people in at a time, and we bring 50 down on the bus, so that's not happening because of COVID. As the executive director of the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education, I applied for that job because, not that I was getting tired of teaching at the college, but I felt I could make a contribution based on the survivors that I had known. Especially I've had Esther Robb, whose son is on the commission, who escaped from Sobibor. We would show the film in class. As a result of that, the next day, Esther would come in and share her experience. I had Rabbi Murray Cohn, who was in Auschwitz, and actually I went to the second time to the camp only because he was going with the master's program. The catch with him was, I will get off at Frankfurt from the plane, I will get on a train and go to Poland, but I'm not staying in Germany, which I can completely understand. So I came home from class when I was still taking actually his class, and I walk in the door and my wife goes, you're going back again. I says, how do you know that? I didn't even say, you usually ask me how class was. She goes, how did you know that? She goes, we've been married for like 20 years. I pretty much know you by now. So when are you going back to Auschwitz? I says, this summer. The guy that was my roommate the first time ended up being my roommate the second time, and he taught at Cherry Hill East High School in an English class and going over the literature of the Holocaust. Several years were passed, and I ended up going back again in 1996, and I met David Wishnia. Does anybody here know Cantor Wishnia by any chance? A couple people do? And those that are on Zoom, you may, and you can raise your hand, but I can't see you, so it doesn't matter. He became a tremendous friend of mine. And in 96, we're walking around, we get into Auschwitz, he breaks down a door in the sauna he worked in, and I go, David, what are you doing? He says, it's not a problem. He goes, I was a guest here for 2.5 years. I think I can get into this building, which we did. He did break the door and we got in. As a result, we then go to the bunk where he was in his barracks, and so is where he had scratched his name before he left. And I could not get him to come to talk to my students until 2004. And I go, David, why won't you come in? He says, look, Doug, you have to understand, I was 16 years old when I came to Auschwitz. The students, when I look out to the 200 or 300 kids that are out there, I see my friends. I'm the only one that survived from the town of Sokachev, which I was very fortunate to go back in 2020 for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. David and his family invited me to go, which was truly an honor in and of itself to be there. And then unfortunately he passed away this past June, and I was unable to get to see him again because of COVID, needless to say, has been difficult on everybody. So in 2004, David finally shows up. He goes, fine, I'll come. I said, look, let's do this. I'll do 25 kids in the library. The kids will be well-versed, and we'll have lunch afterwards. He goes, lunch? You're serving lunch? Of course I am. What would you like? He goes, look, I was in Auschwitz. I will take anything that you serve. So he came in, talked to the 25 students for about an hour or so. They asked questions and so on. Everything went well. And we're walking out to the car, and I says, David, how'd that go? He says, that wasn't too bad. I'm trying to figure out who got more out of this, David or the students. So he said, do you want me to come back next year? I said, that would be fine. I'll call you a couple weeks beforehand, and then we'll set that up. So what happened, I would study, the students would study for about 2 or 3 weeks, the Holocaust. We would show, we used to use Schindler's List, but when I got David, since he was in Warsaw, in the Warsaw Ghetto, I used the pianist, and the kids could relate to that, as did he, being a musician, because his voice is what saved his life. So he comes back the following year in 2005. I said, David, I met him outside when he came. And I found out later on, as we go along, that he wanted a Wawa coffee and a chocolate-covered donut. So I made sure I had that. So I go, here's the coffee, here's the donut. And he goes, oh, you're pretty good. I said, well, thank you very much. I said, there's a few more students in the auditorium. We're not going to do in the library. We're going to the auditorium this year. He says, well, how many kids are going to be there? I said, well, last year's students didn't get to hear you. This year's students are going to hear you. All of them have seen the film The Pianist, and they're all ready. I said, there's about 700 high school kids sitting in the auditorium. Now, a lot of people thought I was crazy. You're going to take 700 high school juniors and seniors and expect them to behave. I said, look, we show Saving Private Ryan. We had Bernie Friedenberg come in that was a medic on Omaha Beach. I said, the kids behaved. It's not going to be a problem. They've been properly prepped. As David's walking down to the front, the entire room stands up and gives this man a standing ovation, and he has not said a word yet. I was stunned. That made my teaching career for the rest of my life. He gets up, tells his story, and afterwards, which I didn't realize, everybody wants to now have a picture for him. So he's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. He's like a movie star at this point. All right, he enjoyed that. The students enjoyed what he had to say. You have to understand also, I teach in South Jersey near Atlantic City, and over the 41 years that I spoke, I had 6 students tell me that the Holocaust did not happen. Thank goodness that didn't happen my first or second or third year teaching. The last one was in 2002. Student stands up, literally stands up in class. Now, I went to a Catholic grade school. You had to stand up or the nun would beat you. All right, so what happened, he stands up and he goes, why do we have to learn this? I says, well, 1, it's state law. I go, 2, I think you need to know it from a personal level. And I said, we'll study this for 3 or 4 weeks. You'll see the pianist and you'll meet a survivor. And he said, he goes, I don't know about this. He goes, you know how the Jews are. They lie, they cheat. And so I go, look, we're going to cover this. At the end of the unit, you let me know who's giving you misinformation. It possibly might be me, or it might be where you're getting the information. So he sits down, which is shocking, like I said, in a public high school. One of the other students, they go, and I'll change his name. He goes, John, where'd you get your information from? He goes, well, my mom and dad. Now, I have a very diverse classroom. So he said, well, where'd your parents get their information? He goes, my parents are in the Ku Klux Klan, which unfortunately is still active in New Jersey, which a lot of people aren't aware of, especially in South Jersey, all right, because they wanted to fight with the South during the Civil War because of slavery and so on. So we have these kids in there. David tells the story. He takes all the photographs. And I said, how'd that go? He goes, that was really good. Now, little did I realize, I found out later on that David sang in front of a congregation of about 1,000 people, so 700 high school kids wasn't an issue. So the following year, he came back again. We didn't have as many students because the junior and senior class is the one they had graduated, so I just had the junior class of about 350 kids, and then we start going around to other high schools. Other people hear that this gentleman is telling his story, and other schools want him to come. Then we eventually went up to the Reading World War II weekend for 5 years. We would drive up, stay overnight for a couple days. He would speak anywhere from 200 to 300 people every day. We were with Stockton, which has a very good program. We eventually wrote his book, that he was like, I don't write books. I said, okay. I said, I know, you sing. He said, yeah, I sing. You can write it. I'll okay it. I'll read it over, and then we'll publish the book. Dr. McLaughlin, who's done 75 of these through the Writers Project at Stockton, and I use these now in my classroom because that's one of the texts that you have to read a memoir of a Holocaust survivor. The thing that's interesting, you wouldn't think this would happen at the collegiate level. Usually at the end of, because they have to write a 2 to 3 page review on their book that they read. At the end, they said, I actually read the entire book. I'm thinking, well, that's the whole purpose of giving the assignment. Don't tell your parents that you're not reading all the books if you're a chemistry or physics major. But it's a really good idea. I'm glad you did read the whole book. These are really interesting. I said, well, you're more than welcome, because I give them a list with 65 books on it, most of which have been published by Stockton. And I think a lot of you have probably heard about the Tattooist of Auschwitz. A friend of mine that I met actually on Facebook for Pennsylvania, because originally there was only 4 or 5 states that required Holocaust genocide education in the United States. And Rhonda Whitman, who I had lunch with this summer, and her husband, did 7, if you have a chance, it's called 94 Maidens. It's a video on YouTube. I use that to show my students what students around the world, even in the United States, don't know. And they're kind of shocked that students, let's say, and Oklahoma is where my mom was born and raised, so I'll use that state, but there's a lot of nice people in Oklahoma. But it's not required by state law, so you can graduate from the high schools and go into the college and not have any background on the Holocaust or genocide, which is actually frightening, especially in the political climate that we presently live in. I give an assignment to my students who don't know what anti-Semitism is, and there's actually 4 different levels of anti-Semitism that Dr. Birnbaum has mentioned on several of the films that I use. And so the assignment is, which I'm going to give probably in about 2 weeks, an assignment to find 5 anti-Semitic acts that have taken place in the United States or around the world, and I go, the start date is August 1st. And they go, oh, you can't do August 1st. They go, how about April? We'll never find enough. I go, trust me on this one. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a problem, as you well know. It is a significant problem in this country, and if somebody would have told me 49 years ago, with the anti-Semitism that existed then and what's going on right now, I would have told them, no, you're lying. There's no way. All right, we've come too far. But obviously there's a lot of education that needs to be done in order for people to realize, all right, what a significant problem this is. And if they go after one group, they will go after another group, and they will go after another group. So David came back, and then I went, he wrote his book, and then we ended up going down to the World War II Museum. The one story that he loved to tell is that when he actually, I'll do this quickly for you guys, in case you happen to read the book, is that he saw his family murdered out in front of his house at Warsaw. He then tried to escape. He had a Christian girlfriend. She bought him a ticket to go back to Sokachev. The gentleman that worked with his father, who was a furniture maker, he then eventually tries to escape into Germany. And his plan was to get into Germany, to get into France, go to England, and he had 2 aunts that lived in Brooklyn and the Bronx in New York City. That was the plan. He gets captured because he doesn't have a card for food, and then sent to Auschwitz for 2.5 years. For the first 2 weeks, he worked unloading the trains of the people that had died or that had run into the fence to commit suicide to get out of the situation that they were in. So an officer walks in and says, can anybody sing? And they, yeah, David sings. Now, he speaks 6 languages, all right, a little bit of Italian, but we get by with, Yiddish, Polish, German, English, so on. So what occurs is that the guy says, sing this song in German, which he does. So now when the Nazis have their Nazi parties, all right, he will sing for them, and the officer said to him, look, you can eat anything you want, you can drink anything you want. If you walk out that door and you have 1 piece of food or drink on you, I will kill you. He says, okay, I'm fine, we're good. So he was unable to take anything out to share with his friends, but he had what he would call is a privileged prisoner. As a result of that, he was able to get by. He eventually finds a girlfriend in Auschwitz, which was printed in the New York Times, I guess about a year and a half ago. And as a result of that, all right, he then goes on a death march, but he's working in a really good place. He has nice shoes, he's got a scarf, he's got gloves, a hat, a couple uniforms. He gets the Dachau All right, in Dachau, he looks around, he goes, oh, I'm gonna die here. I don't know anybody. I don't know how the lay of the land is here. So he reads German and sees where they're looking for people to go down to Austria to build more airplane factory in order to get more planes and continue the war for the Nazis. Now, this is in January, February of 1945. So he gets on the train gets strafed by a Russian plane. They jump off the train and try to escape. They get caught. He figures they're gonna get shot. He doesn't. They're back on an open train. They drive again, American P-47, strafes the train. He decides, I'm not trying to escape with a whole bunch of people, so he jumped off by himself, where he does kill a guard, and then eventually goes into the woods for several days. He travels at night, sleeps in barns during the day, and he starts hearing a clanging and banging, so he looks around, and he gets up early in the morning, there's nobody out around the barn, and he looks down this road, which was the Autobahn, and he sees an American column that he thinks are Russians because they have a white star on the side. He was just happy that he didn't see a swastika. So he runs down, holds his hands up, thinking he knows a little bit of Russian, from the Polish, and as a result of this, an American comes out, and he always loves to do this because he goes, I am James L. Walker from South Carolina. He goes, I didn't know a lot of English, and I couldn't understand a word this man was saying. So he asked him, they finally get an American who can speak German, which he can converse in, and they want him to take him back to the SS, and David goes, I'm not going there. So he then gets trained by the military, joins the 101st Airborne, stays with them until he immigrates to the United States. Unbeknownst to him, his girlfriend that he had in Auschwitz, they were supposed to meet at the Jewish Community Center back in Warsaw, but that doesn't occur because she thinks they're going to kill her because she's been there since the very beginning of the camp. She was a graphic artist by trade, and the feeling is that there's no way this woman has seen too much. She worked in the office of the SS for those that have been to Auschwitz, and so that's not happening. So he comes to the United States, makes a new life, marries his wife, has 4 kids, one which is a rabbi who just recently retired, is around my age, so he's obviously pretty young like I am. Even though I'm 70 at this point, but be that as it may. So he ends up in the United States, but he thinks that Zippy has been killed, and we actually find her about 4 years ago by reading a book that she had been interviewed after the war, and we tracked her down from the professor down at the Holocaust Museum in DC, and his grandson and granddaughter went to see them because the grandson went to NYU as a music major, and he knew New York like the back of his hand. And they found her. So then David goes with them, and he meets her. And she's a little bit upset because he didn't show up at the community center, needless to say. A woman scorned. But everything was passed over. And he says, look, I got to ask you one question. How many times did you save my life? She goes, I took you off the train 5 times. And he never knew that. Now, his older brother had been taken to Treblinka after he had gotten captured, and was involved in the revolt, but was killed afterward, but he didn't find that out until he had gone to Israel in 1948. And his younger brother and his mother and father had been killed at the Warsaw Ghetto when he came back working for his father that day. So he kind of figured his dad might have known what was going on. But the students really resonate with the story when you have a survivor there. We're getting to the point right now, as you well know, where those people are getting to be a minimal, and that becomes my job because I am now a witness, as Elie Wiesel has said. Once you've heard a witness, you become a witness. My students have no idea when they're taking my course that they're just taking another class. And it's a GIS class, and they need so many of them to graduate, and I have 25 students, and 14 of them took the course because it's a GIS class. Several of the other ones took it because people told them I was a good professor. And I go, look, you've been lied to. I said, I'm not that good. I said, but hopefully the material will be. So they end up with, I said, well, what happens, and they don't know this yet, but I'll probably wait another couple of weeks, is that when they leave, they are now witnesses to what's going on. They have an obligation, all right, to tell their children, because I'm not just teaching them, I'm teaching their kids. Going back to the student whose parents were in the Ku Klux Klan, at the end of the unit, he walks up to me and he goes, can I talk to Mr. Wisnia? I said, you're more than welcome to. Do you want me there or you good to go? He goes, nice, I'm good. Walks over, shakes Mr. Wisnia's hand, says, thank you very much for sharing your story. Years go by. My summer job, if you're in a teaching and education in the United States, you have a summer job, so I painted houses for 35 years. No, I'm not doing that anymore. I fired myself 3 years ago. And I see him and his wife and his 2 or 3-year-old daughter in Home Depot, and I'm buying paint. He goes, yo, sir, how you doing? I go, good. He goes, because I had offered to pay the $30 for the bus, because the museum's free, for him to go down to the Holocaust Museum. He goes, sir, I can't do that. My parents find out, I'll get thrown out of the house. I said, no problem, I understand. Well, here we are like 14 years later, and he says, I have to tell you something. My wife and I went to the Holocaust Museum. My daughter will know about what happened during the Holocaust, and it's not a lie, and it did happen. So one can make a difference with what they're doing, and that's what I really want to do. David, I used to have kids write, and for Esther as well as Rabbi Cohn, I always had them write thank you notes. And now, as you well know, with the phones, they don't even know how to write thank you notes. So I've got to go in that process with the English teacher and say, look, this is how you do this, because they want to text everything. Or either do it on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it might be. And I said, so I would read them over, because I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything in there that was inappropriate. And so I would read them, and I finally came across this one, and I was stunned. And then I would put them in a package and then mail them to David. And he would like to read them, needless to say. And the kids were great with what they wrote. You know, I would think, in fact, his family has kept them. A lot of the stuff, you know, obviously you get rid of when somebody passes away. But those things, they're definitely keepers. The one girl wrote, I was having a real bad day today in class. It's been really bad for the last couple of weeks. I thought my life was difficult until I heard your story. They go, really, nothing that I think I'm going through right now can compare. I was going to commit suicide tonight, but after listening to your story, that's not going to happen. Now, needless to say, the next day when she came to class, I said, look, I need to talk to you after class here, because we got to go down and see your guidance counselor and the school psychologist, because that's something that needs to be investigated on, and we want to make sure that you're going to be okay. And she goes, no, that's no problem. She goes, I'm glad you read my note. You know, thank Mr. Wisnian when you talk to him the next time. And I said, that's not a problem. So those things happen on a regular basis. So that's another reason why it's important that the survivors share their story. We're very fortunate at Stockton that we have the Dimensions and Testimony, which you may have seen on 60 Minutes, all right, where they've interviewed Holocaust survivors. It takes about a week. They ask 2,000 questions. Now, I'm not really into the technology like my students are, but it's basically you have the person on the screen and you can ask them questions. And they will, based on the artificial intelligence, composite answers. In fact, the one gentleman that was on 60 Minutes, they asked him, how do they think the Minnesota Vikings are going to do this weekend? He goes, well, there's a stop. And then what occurs is that so I'm not really sure, but it's a toss-up on who's going to win the game. Which is shocking that the computers are able to do that. But most of the questions that the students asked, because when they had this opened up 3 years ago now, because of COVID, we haven't been able to use it, needless to say, is that the students really interact well with this, because now, if you don't have somebody that's going to be around, because my grandchildren and your children or grandchildren are going to be able to interact with somebody that normally you wouldn't be able to do and just be able to show a video. Now, the videos are important, believe me. A young couple from Ohio interviewed David a couple years ago, and it's a 15-minute video that's on memoirs of World War II, and they've done like it's mostly World War II veterans, both men and women, all right, all the diverse groups that fought for the United States, as well as a couple of Germans. There's one woman, I think that's Italian, where they've been able to interview them, and they're about 13 minutes long, and that's really good. And then I can tell David's story and fill in the blanks, since he's unable to do that now, sadly. But it's important, I think, that people realize that this is not, if my students pick this up, it's not a Jewish issue. It's a human issue, that all of us have an obligation to try to stand up, as the rabbi said, as far as being an upstander. We were in the parking lot leaving Auschwitz, and they said, does anybody want to ride with David back to Krakow? I'm good. I want to go. And 2 other people. So I got in the front seat. David's driving. He says to me, now I've only met him for maybe an hour or so. He goes, watch this. I go, okay. So we pull up to the gate, and he's speaking in Polish to the driver. Guy goes ahead, and he starts laughing hysterically. I go, what was that all about? He says, I asked the guy, could I get a discount since I was a resident here for a couple years? And I'm thinking, okay, this guy is too much. So we're driving back, and one of the teachers who taught at Collingswood High School in New Jersey says to him, David, do you think a Holocaust will happen again? Without like a split second, he goes, of course it'll happen again. I'm thinking, that's not the kind of answer I'm looking for. He goes, but it doesn't have to happen again. In fact, we can stop it from occurring again. And the way that we can do that is we do 5 things. And he always mentioned, and almost every Holocaust survivor that I've spoken with or seen speak, is that hate kills. There's no doubt. Hate has, there's nothing good that comes about that. And people kind of throw that word around, and it's unfortunate. He said, so you have to understand, hate does kill. But if we do these 5 things, all right, we can avoid another Holocaust or other genocides. So I could go. What are they? It says, 1, teach your children respect. Teach them honor. A sense of awe, which I've got to explain to the student what that means. You know, like this, an awesome sunrise, that type of thing, or a beautiful flower, whatever it might be. I said, 4th, a healthy fear. In other words, don't walk down a dark alley, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, you have to be careful about that. But he said, last, and the most important, make this a better world than it was before you came. And if all of us did that, no question, all right, maybe someday, and maybe our lifetime, or at least maybe the next lifetime, we will stop killing each other. And that's my hope. And that's why I teach this subject. And that's why the commission does what it does. We take about 30 teachers every summer with Maud Dami, who was a hidden child in the Netherlands. We haven't been able to go over 2 years because of COVID. Everybody with the company that we deal with, you have to have a vaccination. We don't know whether the Europeans are going to let us in this coming summer, or hopefully that's going to take place. Hopefully that gets under, you know, the situation in this country, you know, gets resolved in the near future, hopefully, and that we can take people there, because that is a life-changing experience. I've been to 2 death camps and 5 concentration camps, and you are not the same person that you were before. I was also very fortunate to have Franklin Littell. Dr. Littell was a Methodist minister. In July of '39, he went to Germany in an exchange program. He eventually becomes a Methodist minister and gets his doctorate in theology from Harvard, and saw Hitler speak. I was fortunate to have him as a graduate professor. He's almost like the father of Holocaust education in the United States. So the programs that Stockton officers are second to none in the United States. There's no question. I don't know if our students really realize that. But the whole process is to educate as many adults that teach students, because they want to know. It's not like the students in Oklahoma or North Dakota aren't really aware. They're unaware, but they would like to study this material. And they need to study this so we can be better people. And with the way we do this, obviously with K to 4, you're not bringing up the Holocaust or genocide. You'll wait to get to middle school, and then the curriculum from 9 to 12 gets a little bit more nitty-gritty. There are things that I use in my college classes that I would not use with high school students, all right? But at the same token, there are stuff that I use with high school students, all right, that were very pertinent. And literally, they would thank me after class as the other teachers, because we had about 350 juniors, all right, in order that, you know, I'm glad we did that. And kids end up taking college classes or going down with their friends. The one plus, if there is a plus with Zoom, is that when I had Maud Dami and Ben Lesser, who lives out in Las Vegas, who I met on the elevator in Krakow as a survivor, we would have like the whole sorority, all right? There would be like just my students, the 20 I had last semester, but there was parents there, grandparents there, watching and listening to the survivors. So that was a plus, because we were able to hit more people than we normally did. The drawback, now that I'm back in the classroom, and there is technology, which I just found out from Gail's assistant at Stockton, I can actually put a device on the middle of my computer where everybody can see on the inside. So I can invite anybody, all right, to my class. When Maud, who's very good as a Holocaust survivor with the technology, she'll be home in Flemington, all right, I'll be in my classroom at Stockton, and then everybody can watch this around the United States, which is amazing in and of itself. South Africa Holocaust Center, they have done some fabulous programs. The plus is you don't have to travel. I mean, Yad Vashem did, you know, Gail does a great job at Stockton with what she does of getting, Yad Vashem with echoes and reflections. Everybody's in Israel. There was a presenter in Israel, England, and South Africa. All right, and I'm sitting home in Mays Landing, New Jersey, out in the sticks someplace, getting quality material that I'll be able to share with my students. Now, I need to stop talking because I can go on for hours. And usually I have someone in the back that'll do like this, which my students did to me on Tuesday. Does anybody have any questions that you would like to ask of me? And feel free, I don't bite, whatever you might want to know, I'll be more than happy to go over. And if I don't know, I won't make it up. Yes, sir.
What can we do here at the synagogue to enhance the same education to our children and those who are not ready for it yet?
Pennsylvania, with Rhonda, she really pushed to have the state of Pennsylvania. And it wasn't the legislation that she wanted. It's highly suggested that you cover Holocaust genocide studies in school. So if your students are going to public schools, make sure that your schools are doing that your children are being versed. Like in kindergarten, first and second grade, you're into, be nice, respectful, like the Sesame Street thing, which is not like everybody kind of laughs at that. But if you look back to when you were in kindergarten, first and second grade, those are important. There was a high school, I think, down in Georgia where the football players kind of got together and saw kids eating by themselves. And the one fullback said, that's not happening. So students at that school are not allowed to sit by themselves and eat lunch. I mean, that people might not think has anything to do with the Holocaust, but you're respecting somebody else and you're helping them to get through difficult times possibly. And then, like I said, like in our state, by law, you have to cover it once in K-4, once 5 through 8, and then again 9 through 12. Now, you can't do the Holocaust in 2 days. So what we would like to do is have teachers, we have a 7-day unit. Our stuff's online on our website. It's available to everybody, which I did not know until the 4 guys from New York called us and said, you're the only curriculum that's free on a PDF file. I said, well, knock your socks off. We're revising them, but you're more than welcome to use what we have. And anybody in Pennsylvania can use what we have. Yes? No, that's available to anybody. You can go to David's grandson, Avi, made a website for him because David says, look, all I do is sing. You do the website. Avi sings and does technology. So if you go to One Voice, Two Lives, that'll pop right up as the first thing, and you can order it then. And I don't make any money at all at this, and I don't want to. That was all I said, David. He goes, well, how much of the cut of the book? I go, look, I'm not doing that for this. My pay is you speaking to my students. I'll drive you anywhere you need to go. From up at Reading, we end up going to a high school south of Harrisburg. I drove him out there. I stayed over at the guy's house because he's a former band teacher. They had 1,000 kids. They had the whole auditorium, every teacher in the school, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, listen to David speak for an hour. That was awesome. What was even better is when I was seeing other students doing this, and they were saying, put your phone away. Don't be disrespectful. Kids know. Like a lot of times people say kids won't behave correctly. They know what they're doing. If you treat them with respect and so on, it's not an issue. I've never, ever had a problem bringing any guest speakers to talk to high school kids. We had Tuskegee Airmen, we had Fly Girls, we had guys that were on Omaha Beach, we had guys that did Point to Hawk, Saving Private Ryan, 7 or 8 different Holocaust survivors, 2 guys that liberated camps. And all of them have the major concern. One is that the next generation is not going to know what happened in World War II, and is not going to know what happened in the Holocaust. Yes?
Cantor Wisnia was the cantor of my wedding, my first wedding. And I heard Dave a few years ago, and he was great with his grandson.
Okay. There's okay. Please. No, Dave was a wonderful, wonderful person. And as people say, may his memory be a lesson for all of us. He was a great, great man. And did not want to share his story because who wants to talk about that? But he felt an obligation when people say it didn't happen. And he spoke to over 10,000 people and would have continued if COVID hadn't hit, sadly. Yes, sir. Keene University in New Jersey, University of Minnesota, University of Arkansas, Emory University with Deborah Lipstadt, who had done Defiance, Defiance and what was the name of the film? The guy that was the denier over in England. Denial, okay? But not at the level that Stockton does. It's a shame. Rowan is starting to do that because the woman that runs it there, if you're going to go into education, you have to take a Holocaust genocide class to get your education certificate, no matter what the degree is in. So we do stuff that's going to be cross-curricular. So if you're a chemistry person, they go, well, I don't have to cover the Holocaust. That's social studies and English. I go, no, you ever hear of Zyklon B gas? I said, scientists were very much involved in this. If you're teaching anatomy and physiology, there was a lot of medical experiments that were done. You know, there's a lot of art that was done, so forth. So you try to get people to realize that that's just not something that I do in social studies, all right, or the English teacher, the woman that I work with, you know, doing Holocaust poem and readings. So it's cross-curricular. But Stockton, they're kind of out there unfortunately, hopefully over the next few years, that may happen where more schools realize. I remember one time we took kids to the film. We went to see the Tuskegee Airmen movie, Red Tails. And there was an altercation in the school. And somebody came to me when we were getting off the bus with the kids. They're going, way to go. There was a fight in school and you weren't here to break it up. I go, why am I supposed to be? I'm not a vice principal. They go, yeah, but your students weren't here and you've taught them to be upstanders. So if they hear something going on, that could have been stepped in and stopped before it even started. So even my students realize that. They go, you know, there's an underlying thing here, right? I go, you can't, that doesn't mean when Wawa's being robbed that you jump out of your car and you go, I'm going to stop the guy. I go, no, take your phone out and call 911. I mean, you know, be smart about that. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any adult education classes or continuing ed, either in person or in Zoom?
Stockton has, you can take graduate level classes. You can do the undergraduate classes, but they're going to probably charge you. I think Keene does some classes that are adult education. Stockton, all of the Zoom programs that Gail does is all posted. If you go on our website, we post all of the 30 centers that we have in the state. So, for example, Brookdale Community College with the chain organization with Sarah Brown, she has 4 programs that are going to take place in the next several months. Gail has a program that we posted. There's 3 I think she's doing. So it's continuously being updated by my executive assistant, all right, to make sure that, and they're open to the public. They're all free. There's one that's going to take place, I can't recall offhand. I don't know if anybody's read the book 999. It's the first 999 Jewish women that were taken to Auschwitz. It's an excellent book. Meekham's the woman's last name, I think. I'm doing a thing with Princeton Library on the tattooist of Auschwitz. In fact, I asked David before he passed away, I said, did you know the tattooist of Auschwitz? He goes, oh yeah, I knew that guy. He goes, everybody knew him. He goes, that's how I got my tattoo, 83526. But we do keep a running calendar for that. So if you want to look at our website, just go to New Jersey Holocaust Curriculum and just click on that. And down at the bottom, you scroll up, all right, and there's a calendar down there. You can see the different programs that are there. And if you're ever in South Jersey and you want to stop into my class, just don't tell Dr. Kesselman I let you in, that's all. Not that he would probably mind, believe me. He's a great guy.
Mr. Servey, does every high school in the state of New Jersey teach the same curriculum?
Yes, there's a state curriculum that I was fortunately asked to help revise in 2001. We're presently revising all 3 curriculum as we speak, actually. I'm hoping to have them done by the summer 2022. And everybody wants drop-down numbers, and that will be made available to all educators in the state of New Jersey, and anybody else. I mean, we've been contacted by 9 states. Arizona is the last state that called us. I go, what do you need? They go, what are you guys doing? So I go, here's the legislation, here's our curriculum, take what you want. It's like my dad used to tell me. It's like opening the door with the refrigerator. Take what you like, close the door. I'm not offended if you don't use it. I'm more than willing to share anything that we have. There's no sense reinventing the wheel. But all that's available to anybody in the United States and also around the world now. Yes?
I teach first grade in Philadelphia at a school called Anne Frank.
Okay,
Every June 12th, we celebrate Anne Frank's birthday.
that's wonderful. Like we have Genocide Awareness Month is April. We're going to do as a state for January for International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the week of the 27th. We're going to have a whole week of programs that's going to be open to the public. We do Kristallnacht up in Trenton. Yom HaShoah will also do programs. So it's an ongoing, my job is to make sure everybody's doing that in the state of New Jersey. And with 2,500 schools, it's a lot for two people. We just actually mailed out 2,500 packets. And the Teachers Convention in New Jersey, we'll have a program and a booth set up for teachers to get materials. Rabbi, thank you very much for the opportunity to address your congregation. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, it was nice of you to thank us, but it is we who need to thank you, Mr. Survey, for a wonderful presentation, very uplifting and fascinating and very hopeful. Does us a world of good to know that there are educators out there who have made it their business to make sure that people are learning about the Holocaust, and not just in the Jewish community, but outside the Jewish community, so that we can hope that something like that never happens again. We're going to continue with the Martyrology service. Cantor Sarah Lee is going to chant a beautiful piece that some of you will recognize, Oifen Pribicek.
Those of you who know this song in Yiddish, you're invited to sing along. If you don't know the words and you know how to hum it, you're invited to join. Oifen Pribicek brennt a fire und in Stub is heiß und der Rebbe lernt kleiner Kinderlech dem Aleph Beis. Und der Rebbe lernt kleiner Kinderlech dem Aleph Beis. Solche Kinderlech gedenkche Teiere, was ihr lernt do. Solche noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet's Aleph O. Solche noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet's Aleph O. Lernt Kinder mit groß Cheshek, azoi sag ich euch all. Wer's wird Gecher von euch kennen Ivere, der bekommt davon. Wer's wird Gecher von euch kennen Ivere, der bekommt davon. Solche Kinderlech gedenkche Teiere, was ihr lernt do. Solche noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet's Aleph O. Solche noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet's Aleph O.
We'll ask you to rise now as the Ark is opened, and George Marcus, the chair of our Holocaust Education Committee, will be holding the Holocaust Torah as we recite the special Kaddish found on page 344. And Cantor Sarah Lee will be reciting the Hebrew of the prayer, and we will be responding with the names of these places that have known atrocities and devastation for our people.
Yitgadal,
Kishinev,
Vitkadash,
Warsaw,
Shemei Rabba,
Auschwitz,
Be'alma divera kirutei,
Dachau,
V'yamlich malchutei,
Buchenwald,
B'chayechon u'v'yomechon,
Babi Yar,
ובחיידךו בית ישראל,
Baghdad,
בעגלה ובזמן קריב,
Hebron,
ואמרו אמן, יש מרבה מבורך, לעולם עולם מעמיה יתברך, יתברך וישתבח.
Kfar Kfar Etzion,
ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא,
Mainz,
ויתנשא ויתהדר,
Dresden,
ויתעלה ויתעלה ויתעלה,
Treblinka,
שמי לקודשה בריחו,
Bergen-Belsen,
לעילה לעילה,
Vilna,
מכל ברכתה ושירתה,
Usha,
תושבחתה ונחמתה,
Masada,
תאמירן בעלמא,
Jerusalem,
ואמרו אמן. יש למרא מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו, והכל ישראל, והכל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן.
The Torah will be returned to the ark, and once the ark is closed, you may be seated.
You may be seated. We're running just 1 or 2 minutes early, so feel free, before we reach this final service of Ne'ilah, feel free to take a moment, sit, stretch, whatever you need. For those that were here as we just completed the Martyrology service, what a inspiration, and so much can be said about what Doug just shared with us all, and so grateful for him coming here and joining us this evening. We're about to enter into this last section of Yom Kippur, and yesterday's weather of the warmth, it did not feel like Yom Kippur for many of us. Luckily, it's cooled down today, but it reminded me of a moment that Cantor Sarah Lee constantly reminds me of, a story I had shared with her. We were so blessed to have her here on the Bima with all of us, and I don't think what people realize what she does during the year is she teaches rabbinical students in Israel, Nusach, specifically the high holidays, and so many other things as well, not just for American rabbinical students that are in Jerusalem, but also those that are Israeli at Machon Shechter. Do you also do the seminario?
When they come to Israel,
sometimes
yeah,
the
they're at
Seminario
Shelter.
Rabbinico from Argentina, as well as the Frankel School in Germany. And I just share that as I think I was very fortunate as a rabbinical student to learn from Cantor Sarah Lee, and we also had the opportunity to learn and to daven with her. And it was on my first Yom Kippur in Jerusalem, like a hot day like we had yesterday. I spent most of my time davening at a minyan near my own apartment. But on Yom Kippur afternoon, I decided to make, maybe it wasn't the smartest decision, make a 45-minute walk up this very steep road to make my way to a different community, which was Kilat Maya Notes, which happens to be Cantor Sarah Lee's home congregation, where she and her family are members, and her husband, Paul, is probably, well, they've already finished, but was there earlier today. So as we prepared for Ne'ilah in that final hour of Yom Kippur at Maya Notes, the service that marks this closing of the gates of prayer, a member of the community walked around and passed around bisamim, a fragrant flower that he had found to help perk us up and give us some strength in that final hour of the day. I'm sorry to say that I don't have bisamim for all of you or for those joining us on live stream. But I do want to invite you to look around. Look at those who are around you here in the synagogue or around you at home. And if you're alone at home, well, look at your screen because you have not been alone all this time. We're here with you. When I think back to this moment of smelling the bisamim on that Yom Kippur afternoon, it had less to do with the sweet smell of the flower. It had more to do with the fact that this person did not just keep this bisamim to themselves during Ne'ilah, but instead shared it with the community. Over the past 24 hours, we have spent countless hours engaged in a personal prayer and personal introspection. Yet, although it was individual that we all were doing for ourselves, we did it together as a community. As we prepare for the gates of prayer to close, let us find strength once again in our community. You are not alone. We are here together. And we will cross this finish line together as we will be sealed into the book of life. We begin Ne'ilah with Ashrei, page 394.
Ashrei
Yoshvei Veitecha Oji Halelucha Oji Halelucha
Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo Ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Elohim Tefila nedavila mimcha L'chol yamav v'chadav דעת אדוני ידבר פיו, ויברך ובשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו לרגע מעתה ויד עולם, הללויה.
Page 396.
ובא לציון גואל לשבי פשע ביעקב נאום אדוני ואני זו בריתי אותם אמר אדוני רוחי אשר לך ואתה קדוש אשר תהילות ישראל וקרא זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך על הארץ כבודו ותישאני רוח ואשמר אחרי כל רעש גדול ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד לאבותינו ממקד המלוך אדוני ימלוך אדוני צבאות עמנו בזכות שנתננו ביום כוחנו ברוך הוא אלוהינו שבראנו לכבודו ברוך הוא אלוהינו שבראנו לכבודו ברוך הוא אלוהינו שבראנו לכבודו והבדילנו מן הטועים והבדילנו מן הטועים והבדילנו מן הטועים ונתן לנו תורת אמת ונתן לנו תורת אמת ונתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו וישם בליבנו אהבתו ויראתו ולעשות רצונו ולעבדו בלבב ולעבדו בלבב שלם הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו למען לא ניגע לריק ולא נדבר הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו הוא יפתח ליבנו בתורתו יהי רצון לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואת השם ברוך הוא כבוד המסע וישראל ויפתחו בך יודעי שמך כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיר תורה וידיר
Middle of page 397.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה ועלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דרכו בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ומאומיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר בדמם ויתנשא ויתודה ויתעלה ויתעלה שמנו קדשה בריחו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
We now turn to page 398, and I'll invite those who are able to please rise for our own private Amidah, or time for our own private prayers. Page 398 through 406, and when you've completed your own private prayers, you may be seated. I will add that you'll notice that we use the word, instead of no longer kotvenu, we add in chotmenu. Instead of to be written, we ask to be sealed.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
Before we begin the repetition of the Amidah, the final Amidah of Yom Kippur, in this Ne'ilah service, page 407, we find El Norah Alilah, this piyut, which has an upbeat, positive feeling of a melody that's to give us some strength into this last hour. And it also is a plea for forgiveness as well. It seems to contrast, but we have this upbeat melody to get us ready as when we begin the Amidah, we'll open the Ark, and during the Amidah, I'll have times where I'll mention when as the Ark is opened during that this last Amidah, for those who are able, we ask that you stand, but there also will be times where I'll make mention for those that are unable or are feeling a little bit of feeling the last 24 hours. I'll let you know when you can feel comfortable to sit, or throughout that hour, if you'd like to sit as well, you may do so. But we'll turn now to page 407, El Norah Alilah.
El Norah Alilah, El Norah Alilah, המצא לנו מחילה, בשעת הנעילה. מתי מספר קרואים, לך עין נושאים, ומסלדים בבחילה, בשעת הנעילה. מיכאל שר ישראל, אליהו וגבריאל, בשרו נא הגאולה, בשעת הנעילה.
As the Ark is open, I'll invite to those who are able to please rise, page 408.
אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומר חסדים וטובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גול לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מסוד חכמים ונבונים, ומלמד דעת מבינים, אפתחה פי בתפילה ובתחנונים, לכלות ולחנם פני מלך מלא רחמים, מוחל וסולח לעוונים. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וחותמנו בספר החיים, וחותמנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה.
Amen.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ורחמים. ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים.
Amen.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. ואתה קדוש, יושב תהילות, יושב תהילות, ישראל אליו.
As we turn the page to page 410, this is one of those moments that if anyone needs to sit, I'll invite you to do so at this time. We'll continue to top of page 410, first in the Hebrew, and then we'll read in the English.
שמע נא, סלח נא היום, אבוא כפניים, ונהלל נורא ביום קדוש.
Hear us, forgive us today, for the day is ending, and we shall praise you, awe-inspiring Holy One. Now, may our sanctification rise up to you, for you, our God, are forgiving and merciful sovereign.
ובכן ולך תעלה קדושה, כי אתה אלוהינו מלך מוחל וסולח.
Let's read together the gates of Piyut. Open the gates of righteousness for us, and we may enter them and praise God. We have knocked on your doors, merciful one. Do not turn us away empty-handed. We continue in the Hebrew, Pitchu lanu. Pitach lanu.
פתח לנו לכל ישראל אחינו באחיותינו בכל מקום.
Feel free to join in with Cantor Sarah Lee, as you'll probably recognize this tune.
שערי אורה, שערי ברכה, שערי גאולה, שערי דיצה, שערי הוד והדר, שערי בעתו, שערי זכויות, שערי חדווה, שערי תורה, שערי יהושע, שערי כפרה, שערי לב טוב, שערי מחילה, שערי נחמה, שערי סליחה, שערי עזרה, שערי פרנסה טובה, שערי צדקה, שערי קוממיות, שערי רפואה שלמה, שערי שלום. היי ניי 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 ניי, שערי תשובה. וחותמנו בספר החיים לברכה ולקדושה, כי אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, ושעריך בקדושה ניכנס.
We turn to page 411 for the Kedusha, and I'll invite those, if it's possible, for those that are seated, to please rise.
ובהם תאוחז ותוקדש כסוד שיח שרפי קודש, המקדישים שמך בקודש, ככתוב על יד נביאיך, וכרזה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם, משרתיו שואלים זה לזה, איה מקום כבודו, לאומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו הוא יפם ברחמים, ויחונם המייחדים שמו, ערב בבוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה, שמה אומרים, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, הוא אלוהינו, אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישביענו, ברחמיו שנית, לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, והיה אדוני למלך כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד, ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך קדוש וקדוש אתה.
If anyone needs, you may be seated at this time. We'll continue in the English. We'll read together, Remember Us for Good, fragments of 2 Piyutim. Have compassion on your creation and rejoice in your handiwork. As you vindicate your people, all who trust in you will declare, Be sanctified, Lord, throughout your creation. Though we have no one fully righteous to plead our cause against the one who talks of our guilt, speak to Jacob of your judgment, finding us innocent, sovereign of justice.
ובכן תן פקדך אדוני אלוהינו על כל מעשיך ומתך כל מה שבראת וירוך כל המעשים וישתחוו לפניך כל הברואים ויעשו כולם אגודה אחת לעשות רצונך בלבב שלם כמו שידענו אדוני אלוהינו ששלטון לפניך עוז בידך וגבורה בימינך ושמך נורא כל מקום שבראת ובכן תן כבוד אדוני לעמך, תהילה ליראיך ותקווה לראשך, וביטחון פלא מאחלים לך. שמחה לארצך וששון לעירך וצמיחת קרן לדוד עבדך בריחת נר לבן אישה משיחך במהרה בימינו.
Page 413.
ובכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו וישרים יעלוזו וחסידים בינה יגילו ועולת תקבוץ צפיה בכל אישה כולה כשען תכלה כי תעביר ממשלת זדון מן הארץ ותמלוך אתה אדוני לבדך על כל מעשיך בהר ציון משכן כבודך וירושלים עיר קודשך ככתוב בדברי קודשך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ואין אלוה מבלעדיך ככתוב. ויקבע אדוני צבאות במשפט, והאל הקדוש יקדש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך הקדוש. אתה וחרתנו מכל העמים, אהבת אותנו, רצית בנו, ורוממתנו מכל שנו, וקידשתנו במצוותיך, וקרבתנו מכנו לעבודתך, ושמך הגדול והקדוש עלינו קראת. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו את יום הכיפורים הזה, למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה, ולמחול בו את כל עוונותינו מכל קודש, זכר יציאת מצרים. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, יעלה ויבוא ויגיע ויראה וירצה וישמע ויבקר ויזכר זיכרוננו ופיקדוננו, וזיכרון אבותינו ואמותינו, וזיכרון משיח בן דוד עבדך, וזיכרון ירושלים וקודשך, וזיכרון כל עמך בית ישראל לפניך, לפתע לטובה לכן חסד רחמים, לחיים ולשלום ביום הכיפורים הזה. זוכרנו אדוני אלוהינו בו לטובה, ופוקדנו בו לברכה, והושיענו בו לחיים, ובדבר ישועה ורחמים אחוס וחוננו ורחם עלינו והושיענו כי לך עינינו כי המלך חנון ורחום אתה.
On page 414, let's read the first 3 paragraphs in English together. Keep open the gate for us at the time of the closing of the gates, for the day is coming to an end. The day will come to an end. Soon the sun will set. Let us come into your gates. God, we pray, turn to us, forgive us, pardon us, have mercy upon us, have compassion on us, grant us atonement, conquer sin and transgression.
אל ערך אפיים אתה, ובעל הרחמים הנקראת, ודרך ישובה הורית. גדולת רחמך וחסידך, תזכור היום ובכל יום לזרע ידידך. תפן אלינו ברחמך, כי אתה הוא בעל הרחמים. בתחנון ובתפילה פניך נקדם, כי הודעת לעניו מקדם, מחרון אפך שוב, כמו בתורתך הכתוב, ובצל כנפיך נכס ויתבונן, כי יום וירד אדוני בענן. תעבור הפשע ותמחה אשם, כי יום יתעצב עמו שם, ותאזין שבתנו תקשיב ממנו מאמר, כיום ויקרא בשם אדוני.
Page 416.
אין כת מסלדך, טל לפני כיסא כבודך, מלא משאלות, עם מייחדך, שומע תפילת בעדיך, שומע תפילת באי עדיך. ישראל נושע באדוני, תשועת עולמים. גם היום יבשו מפיך שוכן מרומים, כי אתה רב סליחות ובעל רחמים, כי אתה רב סליחות ובעל הרחמים. יחפיאנו צל ידו תחת כנפי השכינה, חון יכון כי יבחון לב יעקב להכינה. קומנה אלוהינו עוזה וזינה, אדוני לשוועתנו האזינה. ישמיענו סלחתי, יושב בסתר עליון, בימין ישע להיוושע, עם עני ואביון. בשבנו אליך, נוראות בצדק תעננו, אדוני אהיה עוזר לנו.
Page 417.
אל מלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנהג בחסידות, מוחל עוונות עמו. מוחל עוונות עמו, מעביר ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים ולסליחה לפושעים. עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח, לא קראתם תגמול, לא קראתם תגמול. הורית לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כמו שהודעת לעיניו מקדם, כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון, אל כפיים ורב חסד ואמת, נושא חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע וחטאה ונקה. וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מחל לנו מלכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך.
Page 419.
רחם נא כהלדת ישורון, סלח ומחל עוונם, והושיענו אלוהי אישנו.
Have mercy on the community of Yeshurun. Forgive and pardon their sin and save us, O God of our salvation.
שערי שמיים פתח, ואוצרך הטוב לנו תפתח. תושיע וריב אל תמתח, והושיענו אלוהי אישנו.
Open the gates of heaven and open for us your goodly treasure. Save us and do not press your quarrel with us. Save us, God of our salvation.
מלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנהג בחסידות, מוחל הבנות תמו, מעביר ראשון ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים וסליחה לפושעים, עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח, לא חרתם תגמול. אל הורית לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כמו שהודעת לנביא קדם, כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו ויקרא אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון, ערך אלפיים, ורב חסד ואמת, נושא חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, ורחמת ונקה, וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מחל לנו מכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך.
We turn the page to page 420.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו, כי אנו עמך ואתה אלוהינו, אנו בניך ואתה אבינו, אנו עבדיך ואתה אדוננו, אנו קהלך ואתה חלקנו, אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו, אנו שונאיך ואתה רוענו, אנו חומך ואתה נוטרנו, אנו פעולתך ואתה יוצרנו, אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו, אנו סגולתך ואתה קרובנו, אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו, אנו מאמירך ואתה מאמירנו. אנו עזי פנים ואתה רחום וחנון, אנו קשי עורף ואתה ערך אפיים, אנו מלא עוון ואתה מלא רחמים, אנו ימינו כצל עובר ואתה ושנותיך לא יתמו. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, תבוא לפניך תפילתנו ואל תתעלם מתחינתנו, שאין אנחנו עזי פנים וקשי עורף לומר לפניך. אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו ואבותינו ואמותינו חטאנו.
Page 421, I'll invite those who would like the invitation to rise for Ashamnu, the final confession, top of page 421.
Ay, 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 Ashamnu, paganu, gazalnu, dibarnu dofri, hevinu, vehirshanu, זדנו, חמסנו, תפלנו שקר, יעצנו רע, כיזבנו, לחצנו, מרדנו, ניאצנו, שררנו, אבינו, פשענו, שררנו, כי שינו עורף, רשענו, שכחנו, תיעבנו, טעינו, תטענו. סרנו ממצוותיך ומשפטיך הטובים, ולא שבה לנו, ואתה צדיק על כל הבא עלינו, כי אמת עשית ואנחנו הרשענו. מה נאמר לפניך יושב מרום, ומה נספר לפניך שוכן שחקים, הלא כל נסתרו ונגלות, אתה יודע. אתה נותן יד לפושעים, וימינך פשוטה לקבל שווים, ותעמידנו אדוני אלוהינו להתוודות לפניך על כל עוונותינו, למען נחדל מעושק ידינו ותקבלנו בתשובה שלמה לפניך כאישים ונכוחים, למען דבריך אשר אמרת. אין קץ לאישי חובותינו ואין מספר נכוחי אשמותינו, ואתה יודע שאחריתנו רימה ותולע, לפיכך הרבית סליחתנו.
I'll invite those who need to sit. You can do so at this time. And we'll turn to the bottom of page 421 on the left-hand side. Let's read together. What are we? What is our life, our goodness, our righteousness, our achievement, our power, our victories? What shall we say in your presence, Adonai, our God, and God of our ancestors? Heroes count as nothing in your presence. Famous people are as if they never existed. The wise seem arrogant, the clever ones if they lack reason. The sum of their acts is chaos. In your presence, the days of their lives are futile. Human beings have no superiority over beasts. All life is vanity.
ומותר האדם מן הבהמה אין, כי הכל הבל.
Page 422.
אתה הבדלת אנוש מראש, ותכירהו לעמוד לפניך, כי מי יאמר לך מה תפעל, ואם יצדק מה ייתן לך, ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו בלבד יום הכיפורים הזה, קץ ומחילה וסליחה על כל עוונותינו, למען נחדל מעושק ידינו, ונשוב אליך לעשות חוקי רצונך בלבב שלם.
Let's read the English of the second paragraph together. May you, with your abundant mercy, have compassion for us, for you do not desire the destruction of the world. As your prophet declares, seek Adonai, who can be found everywhere. Call to God, who is close. Let the evildoers abandon their path and the wicked their schemes, and return to Adonai, who will have mercy on them, for our God will forgive again and again. You, forgiving God, are compassionate and merciful, patient, abounding in love, and goodness, and desire the return of the evildoers, not their death.
ואתה אלוהי סליחות, חנון ברחום, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת, ומרבה להיטיב ורוצה, אתה בתשובת רשעים, ואין אתה חפץ במתתך שנאמר, אמור עליהם חי אני נאום אדוני אלוהים, אם אחפוץ דמעות הרשע, כי אם בשוב רשע ירחו וחיה, שובו שוב מדרכיהם הרעים, ולמה תמות בית ישראל? ונאמר 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 ונאמר, איך אחפוץ מות רשע, נאום אדוני אלוהים, הלא בשובו מדרכיו וחיה. ונאמר 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 ונאמר, כי לא אחפוץ במות עמי, נאום אדוני אלוהים השיבו וחיו, כי אתה סולחן לישראל ומוחלה לפשיטי ישורון בכל דור ודור, ומבלעדיך אין לנו מלך מוכר וסולח אלא אתה. אלוהינו בני אבותינו ממותינו, מחל עוונותינו ביום הכיפורים הזה, מחה והפר בשעינו וחטאותינו מנגד עיניך כאמור. אנוכי הוא מוחה בשעיך למעני, וחטאותיך לא אזכור. ונאמר 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 ונאמר, מחיתי כאב בשעיך וכענן חטאותיך, שובה אליי כי גאלתיך. ונאמר 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 ונאמר, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לתאר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם, לפני אדוני תטהרו. אלוהינו קדשנו מצוותיך ותגלגלנו בתורתך. סבנו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך. ותראה ליבנו לעבדך באמת, כי אתה סולחן לישראל ומחולן לשבטי ישורון בכל דור ודור. ומבלעדיך אין לנו מלך מוחל וסולח אלא אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני. מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ולעוונות עמו בית ישראל. ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. ביום הכיפורים. יצא אדוני אלוהינו במלך ישראל בתפילתה, והשם הרבנית בביתך, ולתפילתה בבת תקבל ברצון, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, המחזיר שכינתו לציון. מודים אנחנו לך שאתה והניסה שלך הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך במרחם, כי לא תמו חסדיך מעולם קיווינו לך. ועל כולם יתברך ותממשים לך מלכנו תמיד עולם ועד. אבינו מלכנו זכור רחמך וכבוש כעסך, וכלה דבר וחרב ורעב ושבי ומשחית ועוון ושמד ומגפה ופגע רע וכל מחלה וכל תקלה וכל קטטה וכל מיני פורעניות וכל גזירה רעה ושנאת חינם מעלינו ומעל כל בני בריתך.
Page 424.
וחתום לחיים טובים כל בני בריתך, וכל החיים ידעוך סלע, ויהללו את שמך במהרה ישועתנו ודתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, ברכנו בברכה המשולשת בתורה הכתובה על ידי משה עבדך, האמורה מפי אהרון ובניו כהנים, עם קדושך כאמור. יברכך אדוני וישמרך.
כן יהי רצון.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקה.
כן יהי רצון.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
כן יהי רצון.
שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד, באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, תורת חיים, ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה, ורחמים וחיים ושלום, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת, בכל עת ובכל שעה, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ניי 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 ופרנסה טובה. ניזכר וניחתם לפניך. אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה. ניזכר וניחתם לפניך. אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
Amen. For those that would like the invitation, I'll invite you to rise. Avinu Malkeinu, page 425.
אבינו מלכנו, חטאנו לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, אין לנו מלך אלא אתה. אבינו מלכנו, עשה עמנו למען שמך. אבינו מלכנו, חדש עלינו שנה טובה.
We read responsibly. Avinu Malkeinu, we have sinned in your presence.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have no sovereign but you.
Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us kindly in accord with your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, make this a good new year for us.
Avinu Malkeinu, annul every harsh decree against us.
Avinu Malkeinu, nullify the designs of our foes.
Avinu Malkeinu, frustrate the plottings of our enemies.
Avinu Malkeinu, rid us of every oppressor and adversary.
Avinu Malkeinu, rid your coveted people of disease, war, hunger, captivity, and destruction.
Avinu Malkeinu, forgive and pardon all our sins.
Avinu Malkeinu, do not look toward our sins and transgressions, blot them out.
Avinu Malkeinu, return us to your presence fully penitent.
Avinu Malkeinu, send complete healing to the sick among your people.
Avinu Malkeinu, remember us favorably.
We join together in the bold and the Kippur.
אבינו מלכנו, החזירנו בתשובה שלמה לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, שלח רפואה שלמה לחולי עמך. אבינו מלכנו, זוכרנו בזיכרון טוב לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, חותמנו בספר חיים טובים. אבינו מלכנו, חותמנו בספר גאולה וישועה. אבינו מלכנו, חותמנו בספר פרנסה וכלכלה. אבינו מלכנו, חותמנו בספר זכויות. אבינו מלכנו, חותמנו בספר סליחה ומחילה.
Continue privately to the top of page 426. Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us, answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us.
אבינו מלכנו, חוננו עמנו, צדקה וחסד, עשה עמנו, צדקה וחסד, והושיענו. אבינו מלכנו, עוננו בנינו. אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, כי אין בנו מעשים. עשה עמנו, צדקה וחסד. עשה עמנו, צדקה וחסד, והושיענו.
You may be seated.
Beautiful.
Page 428, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביום אכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם לעולם מעיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילא לעילא, מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבץ לו תורו ובאותו לכל ישראל, קודם מבואו דבשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל. ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Ashkochech.
ברוך תהיה.
Well, time is of the essence. I hope you don't mind if I ask you to please rise once again for the Baruch for Mariv, page 445.
V'hurachum yigapevim v'lo yashchid, v'hirbal yeshiva po v'lir kol chamato, Adonai yashil melch yanenu b'yom korenu. Baruch hu et Adonai Amvorah.
Baruch Adonai Morach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Morach le'olam va'ed.
May be seated.
Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil b'yom uvein laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamidim loch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Amari v'aravi. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, והם נגע יומם ולילה, ואהבתך תשים ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Middle page 446.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
We continue privately with the Shema through page 447.
Adonai Elohechem emet.
We continue the Hebrew, page 448.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומים ובני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורתי לא תוסף אליו מלכותך ובניך בוקעים לפני משה זה אלינו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כבוד אדוני את יעקב וגל עומד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל
Page 449.
ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום את אביד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר מו ישראל לעד.
Please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish.
יקדע ויקדש שמי רבה, ילמד יברכותי ומליך מלכותי בחייכון ומכון ובחיידך ובית ישראל, והגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. שמי רבה ברך ולמל מיה. יתברך וישתבח ויבר ויתרומן ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלל שמי קודשה ברכו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה טוב שכתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
We continue privately with our own private Amidah, page 450 through 455. Feel free to continue at your own pace. Page 455, Kaddish Shalem.
יקרא וקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ואלמד יברכותי ומליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון ובחי לכל בית ישראל בגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו
אמן.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם יומי יומיה.
יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתברך ויתרומם ויתעשה ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי לקודשה ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושכתה ונחמתה דמירם בימה ואימרו
אמן.
תקבל צלוטון ובטון דחו יזכרה כבודם ובהונדי בשמיה ואימרו
אמן.
יש למה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואימרו
אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואימרו
אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כהרצון, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונה. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
May be seated. We turn to page 458 as we continue privately with Psalm 27.
לדוד אנא ישיב ממיר. הכל שותים את המתוק כשבתי. שמע מכל יקר אל תפין דולי האמנתי לראות בטוב עיני בארץ חיים, קבל עיני חזק לאמץ ליבך וקבל אדוני.
Page 457, Kaddish Yatom. I'll invite those reciting Mortar's Kaddish, if you're able to please rise. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yama divrach irute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'agala uv'izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam olnei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei kedusha b'chu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata damiran b'yama v'yimru.
Amen.
Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru.
Amen.
Yehu zichronam b'bracha. May the members be for a blessing, and let us say Amen. Page 459, Havdalah.
Hine Yeshuati Eftach velo efchad Ki ozi vezimrat yad Adonai vayil Yeshua Ushaftem mayim besason mimaynei ha-Yeshua l'Adonai ha-Yeshua alamcha v'chatecha sela Adonai tzevaot Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh amen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechosher ben Yisrael la'amim ben yom hashvi'i לששת ימי המעשה ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לחול אמן
We'll turn back to page 429. There are 3 verses that we will chant before the final shofar blast, beginning with the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Ba'ed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Ba'ed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Ba'ed. Adonai hu ha-Elohim, 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 Adonai hu ha-Elohim.
Tekiah Gedolah.
לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, שנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים. Happy 60th birthday to Mark.
Happy birthday, Mark
Amanda's
Phillips.
father. And Mazal Tov to Rabbi Sam and Amanda for getting married this year. This is it.
Thank you for being with us next year. May we all be returned in good health. May we fill the sanctuary and the auditorium once again.
Amen. Amen.
For those who are interested in a second Havdalah and shofar blowing, we're going to be on the playground for those families who are unable to be here in the sanctuary.
And I know the beginning and I
I did make a copy of it for myself.
Lovely.
A copy of that? Sure. Yeah.
I'd like to know the middle parts. Drink the milk like his racetrack.
Shana Tova. Thank you. Yeah, Naimo and Gideon. Nice to meet you. Are we doing just regular melody or that same melody?
Oh,
Should we just do like a weekday melody and then the Debbie Friedman?
that's fine.
Okay. Okay. Good job, guys.
Sharko Chek.